Hi guys, so today is your first day of the benchmark review. We're going to be reviewing ecology. This was your first unit ever this year. I'm just going to briefly go over snippets, like bullet points of the main ideas that you need to know in ecology. And then after the video, you're going to go through and finish the rest of the packet. Remember, your benchmark is October 10th. That is this coming Wednesday. Your study guide's on Google Classroom. All right, first thing we're going over is symbiosis. Symbiosis is simply a relationship between organisms. To review this, I'm going to take you through number 2. Anytime I see these organisms or these relationships, I'm going to write my smiley face annotation. Mutualism is when both organisms are benefiting. Commensalism is when one organism is happy and the other one doesn't care. Competition is when they're fighting over a resource. Fight over resource. I know that's not really a smiley face, but just go with it. All right, parasitism is that one is super happy and the one is super sad because it has a parasite feeding off of all of its nutrients and it puts anyone in a bad mood. So when I read through it, I'm going to just put smiley faces or whatever it is and then match it to my answer choice. It says an oak tree provides a sparrow a place to build a nest. Okay, if I now have a place to live, that makes me, the sparrow, very happy. The nest neither benefits nor harms the tree. If it says neither benefits nor harms, that means that the tree doesn't really care that the nest is there. So I would put a meh face. If I have a smiley face and a meh face, that would go with commensalism. There's your review on symbiosis. Keep going, 2 levels of organization. The 4 that we're going to focus on are organism, which was what this would be like one human. I have one individual of one type of species. Next is population. This is when I would have a bunch of the same species, like the human population. That's a bunch of humans. We're all the same species. Community is when I have 2 or more populations. So that would be like I have a human population plus an armadillo population. Remember, these are still all biotic factors. So this would be like human plus armadillos. This was just humans. All right, here in an ecosystem, this would be like if we're describing humans and the armadillos are there, and then we start bringing in abiotic factors in addition to biotic factors, like they're by a stream and there are lots of rocks, which are both abiotic factors along with soil. Individual, bunch of the same species, more than one population plus abiotic factors. When you're going through here, it's going to give you a description and then you'll tell me which of these levels of organization it's describing. Flip your page. When you are going through this example, you want to be telling me what level of organization it represents because it'll help you answer the question. For example, I see one timber rattlesnake. That is one individual. This would be an organism. You would do that for the rest for students 1, 2, and 4. Flip your page. Again, I want to focus on trophic levels. Trophic levels are like energy levels. Examples of those are like producers, primary, secondary, tertiary consumers. Remember, primary consumers eat producers. Secondary eat primary consumers, and you can get the picture, so on and so forth. Anytime that you see any of these, sometimes it's really confusing to look at, especially when there's lots of lines, so you always want to start by labeling, and you start with the producers. So I would write P for producers for all of these 3 things down here, and then I would just go up. So I would then label the primary consumers. That's everything that would be eating a producer. So remember, arrows point energy flow. This means that the grasshoppers are eating the grains. That makes it a primary consumer. Mice are primary consumer. Birds, primary. Rabbits, primary. From there, all right, I can see now it's eating primary consumers, so to name them secondary. So the bird is eating the grasshopper. I know that the bird is a primary consumer because it eats grains, but it's also going to be a secondary consumer because it's eating grasshoppers, which is a primary consumer. You are going to label the rest of this And then you are going to go through each of the organisms, tell me if it's a producer or consumer, autotroph or heterotroph. Remember, producers and autotrophs are the same thing, consumers and heterotrophs are the same thing. All right, and then if it's a consumer, what kind? Remember, 1 is for primary, 2 is for secondary. I'm just going to label that here. 1, 2, 3, and then P equals producer. Flip your page, please. When we're looking at trophic levels, it's really important that we talk about the 10% rule. From each level, only 10% actually goes from one level to the next, and then 90% of it is lost by heat. So when we're looking at a problem like this, all right, it says producers in this energy pyramid provide primary consumers. All right, I have producers, primary, secondary, third, tertiary. All right, if it's providing primary consumers with this energy, then that right next to primary, I would write 10,000 joules because that's what it's starting with. How much energy is provided to the tertiary consumers? So remember, only 10% of the energy travels up each level. I can calculate that by just eliminating a 0. So secondary would have 1,000. And then you can calculate tertiary to get your answer. So you just have to eliminate a 0 to get this, and then to answer. Flip your page until you are looking at primary and secondary succession. So remember, both types of succession, you're building up an ecosystem and you are increasing species diversity. Sometimes they call it like composition. That's fine too. All right, so primary, remember, it starts with no soil. It has pioneer species like lichens, Remember, lichens are there to break down the soil. They break down rocks into soil because it doesn't start with soil in the first place. So lichens break rocks into soil. And secondary succession, you start with soil. A lot of the time it's after like a natural disaster, maybe like flooding or a forest fire, or like deforestation. Those would all be instances where secondary succession would occur. So when you're going through, anytime you see primary, I would be writing these things. Anytime you see secondary succession, I would be writing these things. Anytime you see succession in general, I would write that. That would be your annotation. Example, if I see no soil present, that instantly tells me that this is primary. If I see that soil is already there, this would be secondary. You should be annotating in similar fashion for the rest of these questions. All right, last but not least, carbon and nitrogen cycles. So carbon, remember, if I'm increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, then I'm increasing the overall temperature. All right, nitrogen cycles, remember there's 80% nitrogen in the air, but we can't actually use it. So the nitrogen starts in the sky, then it rains, and then the nitrogen ends up in the soil. And then we have these nice little plants that have bacteria on their roots that fix the nitrogen. So then the nitrogen can go in this pretty plant and it can actually use it. And then if we eat the plant, then we also get nitrogen too. I will warn you, this question here looks very complicated. All you need to do is analyze the diagram. You'll see some questions like this on your exam. If it looks complicated like this, you just need to break it down and just read the question. You don't actually need to have any biological knowledge to answer this, just a skill to break questions down. I know that was a lot. Go through the rest of the packet and start with the section that you feel the least confident on so you can get the most help in class.